Hey, I found a soapbox. I told you we'd find one. Ah.
There's always one somewhere.
Yep. Hello, and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you are wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. She has about 23 years, and I have about 25. So tonight we are talking about some lines. We're looking at Mackenzie Goodmanson and Jake Hanning from Chicago Classic.
All right, I'm going to drop the link in the chat. Go ahead and give it a watch, and when you're done, we'll get to analyzing.
I would say that generally thinking about lines, you might think that this is more of a spotlighted thing to be thinking about, but it's not necessarily just for spotlighted situations. I think that in spotlighted situations, it is a little bit more important to be intentionally thinking about the lines that you're creating. But it's not necessarily the only time that you would want to think about that. Like in terms of competitions, you have the spotlights and then you have the like heated, right? So spotlights are going to be the most important, time to be thinking about whatever lines you're making. But there is a good reason to also be thinking about lines during heated situations as well. It will increase the chance of, having a judge look at you and thinking that, this looks like really nice control and, they know what they're doing, increases the odds of that. But then in terms of social dancing, lines are not important per se in terms of visually, like are in a spotlighted situation, in a competition situation. But in social settings, it can be something that adds a nice feel to the dance. It adds like a stretch feeling to it sometimes. And it just adds a little bit more to it. It's not something that is like you would be thinking about it so much as you would if you were doing like a spotlight. But it's like when you have those moments in a more social situation, it's nice to take them. It adds a little bit to the dance. It feels really nice to really stretch and express. So I just wanted to mention that. And then there's kind of three main things that you can kind of create lines with. So you would have the legs, the arms, and then like the whole body. So we'll kind of be talking about those three different things. Those are be the main things, but that also like you can create lines with your partner, but not I would say that those are more shapes that you would be looking to create than just lines. So anyways, that's my preamble.
Awesome. To the screen share. Diddly-diddly-diddly-doo.
One thing about creating lines in your dancing is what you're wearing can really change the way that things look. So kind of the types of pants that they both have on are really helpful in creating that nice line. One thing with having pants that are tighter or tapered is that you can kind of see the contours of the knee and the knee area, and that can make a straight line in the leg look less straight, even if it is straight. If you are really wanting pretty lines, these are the pants to go for.
Yeah, especially when they go all the way to the floor.
Yeah.
Like with Mackenzie's, because it really extends that line and smooths it out.
So one thing with Mackenzie's dancing, she tends to emphasize having nice straight leg lines, not to the extent that it hinders any of her following ability. But there are a lot of places that if you were just following and maybe not necessarily thinking about having a straight leg line, she is thinking about that. She seems to be, or what I should say is she has previously thought of that and now it's just kind of ingrained in her movement. But I do want to mention that she is really fantastic with creating really, really pretty lines. She has long legs. She's tall, so she really works with that. But I mean, even if you are not Mackenzie's height, you can still make those nice lines. It is emphasized when you are taller. So.
And it can be harder because you have less time to arrive in that straight shape when you have longer limbs. So something to consider for all of you tall dancers out there. This is a great example of both of them creating nice asymmetrical shape in their body, nice lines, particularly with their less weighted foot. But then as a partnership, they're basically making a pyramid or a triangle shape together. And it's just such a lovely, really simple combination of partnering and nice lines on either side of the connection. And because like they're using the center counterpoint properly, there's this away right here that hits an end point and then rebounds back in based on Jake's leading. So these lovely lines and shape are not just about individual technique, but also the partnered connection as well is what led to this moment in particular. And I also really appreciate that they don't rush out of it right away. They take their time. And Jake, instead of just going from what was kind of like a neutral connection when they got closer to each other, instead of pushing her away, he's inviting her into compression to re-engage connection, to stay there a little bit longer, but also to make sure like he's able to lead her properly out of it.
Yeah.
And then this line is just gorgeous. So it's not just the leg, but it's moving through the spine out the top of the head.
So this would be like the whole body line that we were talking about.
Yeah.
That I was talking about.
Yeah. And the kind of simple arm that's parallel to that line is actually helping. Like if you were to think about if his arm were out here, it would create an entirely different look to it. So sometimes it's totally okay to just have a simple parallel line with your arm.
Yeah, it makes it a really nice, sleek look. And it also, it mirrors what the lower body is doing, which just really emphasizes, it draws your eye to that particular line. So I want to mention that even though Mackenzie is more focused on creating lines with her legs specifically, when she is kind of going into and coming out of her anchors, she is not super concerned about having that straight leg or having a straight leg. She sometimes does, depending on how she's getting in and out of said anchor, but not always. And she doesn't like force anything. She lets the lines happen if they could naturally happen, but she doesn't force them. If you were to force a leg line in this particular situation, what would happen would be, let me add, if you were to force a leg line with a standing leg, what would happen would be you would end up pushing the hips back away from you, and that kind of disconnects things, right? So the foot is no longer connected to the hand necessarily. So in this situation, she's just kind of taking stock of where things are at and going with the flow. And then she allows the line to come in once she's kind of moving forward. And so she creates the lines with that front leg first, and then as she's pressing out of the back leg. But it's not like, that's not her first priority, because it's not happening when she is kind of moving through that anchor. It's more when she's out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I love the kind of extension of the whole body that Mackenzie allows as her arms kind of come up and over. She's kind of sitting down into this first, ever so slightly, and then she kind of lets it come up. And as she does that, she creates a really nice line and then comes up right on top of her foot. And then she relaxes into the knees in order to prepare for wherever he's going to take her. And that's the important part. The reason that she is really sinking into those knees, yes, he is leading that based on what's happening with their arms, but also she wants to come out of that really straight knee position in order to wait on him, right? So it gives her more stability, and it allows her to be able to just kind of hang out there. But then also it allows her to be able to react faster when he does start moving her. Because I don't think she really knows where he's going with this necessarily. So it's easiest for her to just kind of soften the knees, be prepared to move wherever. And then when she does kind of see where things are going, she ends it with some really nice lines, leg lines.
Mm-hmm. Never underestimate the value of patience as a follow.
Very important. Can create some really nice moments.
Yeah. And then this pose, like, so Jake's pose is lovely. It's just a standard like split weight hotel pose, as it's called. But Mackenzie's is just such a divine leg line, plus the simple like curve to the back. It's a power pose, and it just looks amazing. And it's really simple, but like it's the power of lines.
Yeah, because she has her feet quite a bit further apart than normal. It really emphasizes the lines that she has, and it makes it feel a lot bigger.
Yeah.
In terms of her and Jake, like the comparison, like they technically, their feet are probably about the same width apart, but because for Mackenzie, it's just a little bit extra, and she really is emphasizing the lines and then the line of the back, the arc of the back. It just looks a little bit more powerful.
And what you mentioned about the really wide stance, I also want to bring up that, like, if you tend to have a slightly wider stance as just your foundation, so like me, I have a wider hips, so the width of like my third foot tends to be wider than someone with a narrower frame in their pelvis. And so just making sure that when you're aiming for like a wider stance like that, it's clear that you're doing something different from your basic. So the contrast is what's really important to make something like this pop. If the contrast is ambiguous, it won't have the impact you want. And if you are a competitive dancer, that is something really important to take into account.
And also social, like those are the type of moments that really communicate to your partner that you want to take a breather and just kind of hang out for a moment.
Yeah. And this is a really tiny technique thing, but this inside turn, I just want to highlight how the rotation is being prepped and led from this handhold. And if you watch, these handholds don't connect until right about there. So their hands are like near each other.
Yeah.
But she's in no way rushing to connect the handhold. Just a small detail that I thought I'd point out.
And legs are generally the main thing that you'll be working with when talking about lines. But there's also like lines with the arms to think about. If you're wanting to make your dancing visually appealing, right? So with Mackenzie here, she has her arm kind of crossed over in front of her, and she allows it to drape back, and she lets it fully extend back away from her to get this really nice line. And so she lets that line kind of hang out there for a second before she's moving forward with the rest of her body. But what's really nice about this particular line with the arm is that it's a nice contrast. It's a ways away from the body, and her feet, she's bringing them together. And so having that arm in that nice line kind of really emphasizes that angle that she's at with the rest of her body. And by bringing her feet together, you can really see that she is leaning back. And that arm really emphasizes that.
Mm-hmm. And I want to add the arm is following through on the rotation of the body. Mm-hmm. So it's staying draped across her torso and is moving open because the torso opened up. And it's really important that that's the chain of cause and effect, because this kind of arm styling is very popular because it looks lovely. And but we sometimes see followers trying to emulate that, and the arm moves first ahead of the body, and that it doesn't work the same. So the line needs to come from the torso. So once again, we've done like a whole episode that's very popular on 1 foot spins. And even though this is a free spin, it's prepped very similarly. It just releases downwards instead of just level across. And I want to emphasize that it's a release and not a push. Just side note. So Jake is following through with where her hand is going and offering, I would say, like steady connection, but he's not increasing it and being like, go this way. I say that because I've been pushed through those sometimes, and it's not fun.
Yeah, it's hard to keep your balance when that's not what you wanted.
Yeah.
Mackenzie starts out with some really lovely lines for this free spin. And technically, this is ideal for a 1 foot, like the lines that she has with that free arm and free foot. They should be open behind you initially before they rotate in. But it's so nicely matched with having both the leg and the arm nice and elongated behind her. If she were to have that leg elongated and then have her arm just kind of bent, it's going to take away from that lovely leg line, first of all. And second of all, it's not as effective in terms of prepping you. But I've seen it, so.
And this moment where there's like a breath before they escalate this from like a free spin to a ride. She's using these lines functionally. It's not just a visual. Why is the pen not working? There we go. Because these lines are expanding her body to slow the rotation, and to send her energy up so that way she can then go back down again. So they look lovely, but they're also very, very functional.
Yeah, and the way that she has them, it is balancing her out really well. So she's relying on Jake a little bit. But because this is going from a free spin to a catch, she can't and shouldn't rely on him immediately, completely. Right. So she is doing this for multiple reasons. It also really helps balance herself while they're getting into that strong connection so she can drop and go on that ride.
Mm-hmm. And just like with the free spin, she starts with her free leg behind her, and then it comes in forward. In forward. It comes forward. just adding in words now. Yeah, very helpful. And I want to emphasize how just amazing of a job Jake is doing of keeping her center over the standing foot. I don't know about you, but it feels like sometimes leaders, they see the free foot out of the peripheral and they're like, let's get your body over that. No. That's not how that works.
That is not what we want.
No.
So we have some nice lines here. Back to that really strong compression moment, kind of similar to the first one that we looked at where they were both in that kind of A shape.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a totally different look because Mackenzie is rotated towards him instead of a little bit more open. But she's still like very intentionally creating the leg lines because she's to the audience. They can see both of her legs based on the way she's standing. And so you want to make sure if the audience can see both of your legs and you're going to stop. Ideally, you want to stop with some nice intentional leg lines, right? So she's really pressing into that leg forward down into the floor and allowing the back leg to kind of stretch out away.
And then I want to highlight the way Jake is hitting his own like pose with a lovely line. But once again, it's functional. Mm-hmm. He's very much intending his body forward to apply compression. And he's also put the handhold like right in front of his hip over top of his left thigh. So that way, if he needs to, he can actually brace the handhold against his torso instead of just having hand contact. And so this is one of those where form meets function moments again. Like a lot of lines in dance are just making the function also gorgeous. Yeah. So remember that, like, just like I was talking about earlier, it's like the arm comes after the torso originates the movement and the arm follows through with it. The same can be applied to almost anything in dance, often arbitrary lines that exist outside of functional context feel weird. And if you don't know that's why it's weird, now you know.
Yeah, I like to think of lines as kind of the icing on the cake. Because generally lines are something that you intentionally create, but it doesn't have to be created. And when you're newer, or you don't completely understand the uses or how to get into really nice elongated lines, it's kind of like on the back burner in my opinion, or at least it should be on the back burner, because you want to focus on the technique of connecting with your partner first. And so you'll see like the prettiest lines at the all-star and champion level because they have had time to hone their other techniques and, work on other things. And so now this is kind of one of the last things to add in and is really focusing on adding in those really nice lines when you have the option to.
Yeah. And this is where, like, something we actually touched on with guest host Robert Royston last time was the idea that a lot of times excellent dancers from other genres come into West Coast swing and they do really well competitively, but they never get the foundation of swing. And so that's where you can have like almost a really, it's like the uncanny valley of West Coast swing, where you're like, that was a gorgeous line, but for some reason it didn't fit. And often it didn't fit because it doesn't have the foundation of swing technique and functional West Coast swing connection, creating the foundation of the movement to create the line. And that's why it's like, well, that was pretty, but why didn't it work? And so, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times I like to think of creating lines as creating a stretch in the body or across the body. And generally that comes with confidence in your dancing and in your partner. So that, but you know, it's something that it's nice to think about if you are competing and you have, you know, worked on other things and you feel like you are at a comfortable level elsewhere. But if you feel like you're still struggling to follow or struggling to lead, like that's really not the thing you should be focusing on, because you can do the same things without the lines. It just won't look quite as clean and polished, but that's okay if you are, you know, a newer dancer. Like you don't have to look clean and polished. That's not the goal.
All right, I want to now talk about this lovely shape and line that Jake gets into here. So he's extending a line through his leg out his body, but he has a bit of a flexed ankle. And so what's neat about West Coast swing is there isn't hard and fast rules. Wow. There aren't hard and fast rules about pointed versus flexed ankles. For a lot of it, it's up to your own personal discretion for what kind of style you want to have. And I always like, and this is kind of what we talk about a lot here on Nerdy West Coast Swing, is like they're all valid tools in the toolbox. So you pick up the tool when you want to use it. So regardless of whether you're a man, a woman, non-binary, gender fluid, a pointed toe can look amazing on you. A flexed ankle can look amazing on you. It's like what effect do you want to create for the moment you're in, for the song you're dancing to, for the partner you're dancing with. Traditionally, in more gendered dancing, there tends to be like pointed toe equals feminine, flexed ankle equals masculine. But I would say we're moving away from that. So it's just like, what do you think looks cool on you? Do you?
Yeah.
Hey, I found a soapbox. I told you we'd find one.
There's always one somewhere.
Yep.
So Mackenzie goes into this like deep, kind of squatted position almost, but there's a lot of flex in the knees, and she extends around. Can you go back to before she does that little ronde around? So she is starting, right? She switches her weight. So because she kind of moves a little bit towards Jake, she switches her weight from one foot to the other and frees up that right leg. And what she does, it's a really, really nice line that she makes initially, right? So she presses through the foot to send it back diagonal and draw it around. So she has a really lovely line. It's a little bit hard for us to see from this particular angle, but she has a really nice, lovely line that's going to create a really unique shape with her body, where it's kind of crossing. And then she draws back in with the toe on the floor, right? So she has the kind of the side of the foot on the floor initially, and then she kind of draws it around, and like the top of the toe almost is kind of on the floor, and she draws it in. And so because of the contact that she's keeping with the floor, it has that really nice line and it flows through, right? So it's not like she's just creating a line and then coming out of it. It's like she's moving through that line, and it makes it look very dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Then what you mentioned about how because of our camera angle at the very beginning, and she's basically moving her leg directly away from us in the camera. So there's, for those of you who are familiar with like drawing and stuff, or I guess this term gets used all over the place, but it's the concept of foreshortening. So if a line is moving directly towards or away from you, you're not going to be able to perceive that line. Like if I were to like point directly at the camera, you see the tip of my finger, you don't see the line of my finger. Whereas when I point away, you can see the line of my finger. So this is if you want to get like super bonkers nitpicky, or if you're getting into choreography, considering where your audience is and how your line relates to their visual perspective can be another thing to consider. So this is one of the reasons why a squared off anchor is often not as dynamic as one that's more opened up to the audience, because a squared off anchor is reducing the audience's ability to perceive lines, just as a very simple example. So and that's why it's hard to see what Mackenzie is doing here, particularly because of our perspective in the camera. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, talking earlier about anchors and how, the legs shouldn't, like having straight legs shouldn't necessarily be the focus. There are times where that is intentionally the focus. And this is one of them, right? So Mackenzie gets into this shape where she crosses the back leg in front, right? And so her standing leg, I mean, she has weight kind of on both of them, but mostly on her right leg. It's a little bit bent, but because of the way that the left leg drapes across and in front of it, you can't really tell that. Right. And so it just makes a really, really pretty, smooth, clean line.
Kind of, once again, the magic of pants. That's just making it that much better. Because she'd look amazing in leggings, but the pants just.
Yeah. Really emphasize.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that because I was saying, that generally the straightening of the legs is not necessarily important and or should not be the focus of the anchor. But like in this type of situation, that's what you are doing this for, is to create the nice, pretty line.
Then I also want to just emphasize, or not emphasize, but point out the contrast, because I love how Mackenzie is not afraid to bend her arm to create contrast in her arm styling, but also it just makes it so much more engaging when, I don't know, there are times for the whole body to be giving the same message, and then there are times for there to be variation throughout the body. If the entire body is contributing to the same line the whole time, it's like talking in a monotone, which I tend to do. I apologize. But adding some variety can be so just impactful.
Yeah.
So this is a really great example of that stretch Alicia was talking about, but from the leader's perspective. So Jake is essentially taking out the first triple step in this whip to get a line. And again, this is an instance of him flexing the ankle instead of pointing the toe as his prerogative. But he's using this extended leg functionally to shift his weight that way to compensate for Mackenzie's moving away from him.
Yeah.
It's a really fun styling. Comes from Lindy Hop and feels really good because you basically just ride the follows momentum, but making sure that you are being intentional with the line you're creating with your free leg when you do that is really important once you have the connection part down.
And anytime that you're thinking of creating a line, you want to think of stretching away from the center of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to have your muscles like extremely flexed, you know, to have that nice line. Like Jake doesn't have, you know, his muscles like extremely flexed to create a straight line here. But he is still stretching away. And so that's creating that line rather than like really flexing in order to create that straight line.
Right. This is a very relaxed position, even though it does have, it's like it's engagement without working too hard. He's not like flexing his quadricep as far as it can go. Right. It's
right. He's engaging by moving away from the rest of his body.
Like all muscles are trying to move his foot away as opposed to simply the quadricep extending the leg, for example. But all of the muscles around the leg are like, get away.
Right. And that's why he ends up having a slightly flexed foot because he isn't like really intensely engaging all the muscles in that leg. Which is totally fine. I just wanted to mention that's why it looks a little bit flexed. It's not flexed. It's kind of in between being flexed and being pointed. Kind of relaxed.
It's relaxed, This is one of those things, like as a leader, it's your prerogative. Do you want a straight, do you want a pointed toe? Do you want a relaxed ankle? Do you want a flexed ankle? And that's your choice. This is where you become the dancer who looks at yourself in the mirror to decide which one you like on you better.
Yep. And with this kind of relaxed line that we're getting, he's using the weight of that foot to really help stretch the muscles down to the floor diagonally. And if he were to want that toe to be pointed or the whole foot pointed, it would be thinking of like pressing instead of thinking of using the foot weight to stretch. Anyway, I love the line that Mackenzie creates. She gets put, right, so she comes out of this rotation, and because she knows where he's going with this, she allows herself to come up onto a fully straightened leg and also straighten the arm with it, right? And so we have a really, really nice flow from foot to hand because it's all the same side of the body. And we're just kind of stretching away with everything.
Yep. Then if we watch what Jake's doing, so once again, he's kind of countering her with a free leg like he was doing before. It's just a slightly different context.
Yeah.
And when he comes around after this triple, he's going to be moving into a brace step, right? So he can once again, like essentially, it's an extremely delayed weight transfer in order to brace against energy. And what he does is he picks up his left foot and kicks his heel up towards his butt before creating a really strong line with his left foot into the brace step. And so that's another thing that can be viewed as a masculine thing. But again, it's like if you enjoy the way it looks on you, doing that strong bend of the leg before shifting into a straight leg can really add emphasis and impact to the straight leg. Just if you're super flexible, try not to actually kick your own ass, because that's usually uncomfortable. Anyways.
Ooh, that reminds me, actually. I like how that reminded me of a serious topic I was going to mention.
You're welcome.
So one of the things that dancers do tend to be on the more flexible side.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them, and it doesn't matter if they are or aren't, but there is a tendency that they are. And sometimes you will see hyperextension through joints because of that, like because they're so flexible. And I would say when you're creating lines, if you know that you're like hypermobile, if you would hyperextend the knee back when you're wanting to create just a nice leg line, I would work on figuring out where, like how much you need to put into it in order to create a straight leg or a straight line. Because if you just fully extend, right, then it's going to have like a curve to it. Yeah, and like it looks
my finger.
nice, but it looks a little weird, right? And so, and also it's kind of damaging to the joints to be hyperextending it like that frequently. So you want to work on like if you do have that problem, work in a mirror with yourself to just see like where, like how much am I putting into this when my leg is straight, when my arm is totally straight. That way you can get the feeling for it, so that you're not hurting yourself trying to create these lines.
Yeah. So. Just to make it like super clear. So the green line is Mackenzie's just perfectly straight leg, and hyperextended knee, it goes in the direction of the pink line, just so it's like really clear for everybody.
We don't want that. It is, I mean, it looks okay, but like it's not good for you.
Yeah. And like 2% hyperextension can look really lovely, but I think beyond that, it just looks uncanny because most people understand the human body should not do that. So it's just like, what's wrong? You okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know you're going to regret that movement in a few years?
Yep. So thanks for mentioning King, but
you're welcome. You're welcome.
That reminded me of that thing that I wanted to bring up.
You can always depend on me to mention pain. Chronic Pain Club, check in the comments below. All right, I think this moment right here is a great place to end for the night, because I love this partnered shape and lines that they make together. It's just so excellent. I'll let you go first.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is actually kind of a more unique shape that we're getting into. It's like a K that we're creating with the body, because they both have the bent one leg that they're standing and weighted on, straight other leg extended, and then they have those arms also coming up as well at that kind of same rate. So we're seeing not only a line in each of their bodies from hand to foot, but because they're doing it so well matched, it's more emphasized.
It's so satisfying. Mm-hmm. And this is a moment of like, well, she's not flexing her ankle per se, she is flexing her toes, and which is different because she does tend to point her toes as her kind of like basic line technique. So this is an example of like switching it up from your basic can be amazing too. Just a tiny detail. And then because I wouldn't be who I am without being a stickler for this. Yes, Jake leads this hand towards him, but that is coming from his torso shifting that way towards his standing foot. As soon as the hand starts moving this way, he is resisting her. He is offering compression to cushion her and support her into this movement. He is not pulling her into this movement. She feels very sturdy and can really like compress into that handhold.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I would even say that she's leading it. Mm-hmm. Because of the way that she rotates open and leans. Mm-hmm.
And then another thing that you could like gender masculine or feminine is Jake's use of his free arm. So he has a very strong straight arm with straight fingers. And then at the end of finishing his line, he bends his arm, which allows it to have that more masculine look to it, whereas Mackenzie's straight arm and relaxed wrist, which tends to look more feminine. And so they're able to basically do the same thing as each other, but with their own personal style translating it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about how she is relaxing her head back as she comes out of this? Because I know you're really good at explaining the technique of that without hurting yourself.
Yeah. So this is a really controlled movement. One thing that you can kind of see when people are playing around with dropping the head back is it just kind of drops, right? There's no control to it. It's like back of head to the back, right? And there's not a control to it. But Mackenzie is really, really controlling this. So if you watch what she's doing, she's actually kind of coming in first with the chip and then releasing back, right? And so by not just, if you are standing up and you just release back, you don't really have as much control over that with the muscles because of the weight of the head. So she's drawing it back in and then extending it. And that way you can control the weight of the head a little bit more with the neck rather than just tipping back.
Yeah. And would you say, okay, this is a profile of a head. That's not a head. That's not a head either. That's an astronaut. But anyways, we're going to work with it. So head on a neck. And this in theory should be the chin. I can't anything. But anyways, what I'm seeing, instead of both trying to expand this and contract this, it feels like just expanding that without contracting the back of the neck. Is that also how you think of it?
Yeah, I don't think of engaging the back of the neck in terms of like extending it. I mean, you can if you want to, but it makes it more unstable. And like ideally what you're looking for is just that extension and the drop, right? That's what creates the line. And so if you are thinking of extending the neck, it's going to create a more extreme bend and actually makes it less of a smooth line. And the other thing to think about is where you're stopping the head, right? So you're not just letting it drop all the way back. You are placing it back to a set point and then coming out of it, right? It's not just a drop.
Yeah. So there's like some resistance back here to prevent the base of your skull from bonking your neck. Cool. Fun time. let me see what we've got on the schedule for next week, because we are doing another live episode next week.
Yep, we have
And oh yeah,
Mary and TJ.
yeah, and we're talking about weight support and weight assisted things. So that's gonna be fun. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It's a nice chill evening. So lovely. Just as lovely as the lines. Ah. I'm gonna stop making bad jokes now, and I'm gonna stop the recording. Thank you. This is just making me think of his sleeveless top for their routine. I'm thinking about his guns. Yeah. Anyways.
And she has about 23 years. I have about 25. Is that correct?
I don't know.
I think so.
We'll have to do the math again. You're probably right. I just have lost the ability to arithmetic.
Correct. I just like I had to think of it as I was saying it. I was like, oh, we upped this. What is it now?
Did that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm struggling with my English today.
Me too.
All right, cool.
Still a little foggy.
Woohoo! Let there be fog. I hear a weird, like, steam releasing feedback sound. And it turned on when you unmuted yourself. Yep.
I have no idea what that would be because I don't hear anything.
Excellent. I don't know. It wasn't happening before. It's maybe like the cord connection. Oh, now it's gone.